So it's the last day of July, that time of the summer where we start to say, I can't believe summer's almost over. It's just a few weeks until school starts again. It's gone so fast. Then again, I can also see on the faces of some of you who are parents of school-age children that you're ready for that first day of school to get here so you can sing like the Staples Back to School commercial, "It's the most wonderful time of the year." That may be especially true today for our faithful volunteers who have just spent a week cranking out Vacation Church School. It is a lot of work, and you're feeling that special quality of summertime exhaustion this weekend. Even so, we know that come May and June next year, we'll be longing once again for a break from those same routines and looking forward to a change of pace and a change of scenery and relaxing days with family and friends when we're able to kick back and enjoy the good life. The writer of Ecclesiastes holds a rather dim view, as we have heard, of what he sees as the endless cycle of toil that keeps our nose to the grindstone of life and makes us wonder if we ever even have time to pause and reflect whether we are getting anywhere with all our labor under the sun. Like Socrates, the sage of Ecclesiastes is driven by the conviction that the unexamined life is not worth living. And yet, much to his disappointment, he returns from his heroic quest for the meaning of life rather empty-handed. Like Saul Bellow, our sage attaches an addendum to Socrates' motto: the unexamined life may not be worth living, but the examined life may make you wish you were dead. We may not be driven quite to that extreme, but we do sometimes wonder what all the striving is about. Don't we? Or if we think we know what life is all about, we sometimes wonder if all our striving under the sun day after day is getting us to that point. Are we living the good life? Or are we just running on the treadmill of toil, working our posteriors off but not getting anywhere? Our friend and Bible scholar Bill Brown of Columbia Seminary down in Decatur, Georgia, points out that the sage of Ecclesiastes reflects the anxieties of his day. Living under the reign of the Persian Empire prior to the conquest of Alexander the Great in 333 BCE, that's when this was most likely written, Ecclesiastes. And under the Persians, the economy was increasingly commercialized. A standard monetary currency has been established to facilitate trade with Egypt. An aggressive system of taxation was enforced by the Persians, and a new market-driven economy of global proportions was emerging. It was a time of great opportunity for financial gain, but the rapid growth did not benefit everyone, just those who could keep up. Those who began with some wealth to invest could do quite well, but those of more meager means would quickly be left in the dust. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? So it should not surprise us that the sage of Ecclesiastes, one of the wealthy who had the resources to participate in the economy and also the leisure to take time to pause and reflect, would begin his reflections with a leading question about the point of all this toil and gain. His conclusions are not terribly encouraging. They are dismal, actually. He paints a picture not unlike the Greek myth of Sisyphus, who, of course, you know, was punished by the gods for his self-serving craftiness by being forced to roll a great boulder up a hill only to watch it roll back down again and roll it up again and back down again, repeating this action throughout all eternity. But our sage recognizes that he won't live forever, and that one day the fruit of all his toil will be left to those who come after him. This seems to him a great vanity, for who knows whether they will be wise or foolish, yet they will be master for all for which I have toiled and used my wisdom under the sun. I'll be going back in October to preach at the homecoming for the first church I served in Virginia. And I can remember in the months after leaving Virginia and moving to Pittsburgh, I would have this recurring dream of going back to that church, and the bricks had fallen down around the columns and they were standing, and the church was in ruins. And I had this haunting, recurring dream that all that I'd worked for there, that we had worked for there, had fallen apart. It's still standing, by the way. I'll be preaching there in October. Our sage doesn't leave us here, though, in this Sisyphean futility. In the end, he finds that life does provide some opportunity for enjoyment. Once in our reading today, and 7 times in the book of Ecclesiastes as a whole, we are encouraged to live a life balanced with work and rest and enjoyment. We hear that there is nothing better for mortals than to eat and drink and find enjoyment in their toil. This also, I saw, is from the hand of God. Instead of trying to make sense of the bigger picture, the sage encourages us to simply look for those simple moments of joy, the simple pleasures of eating and drinking and fellowship, and the satisfaction of hard work well done. These simple pleasures are what life is all about. It's not bad advice, really, as far as it goes. There is a good life to be enjoyed in the midst of all our toil, if we can learn to appreciate it. But then comes Jesus with his parable. And Jesus, as we have come to expect, will take us further and deeper on the path of wisdom. Jesus warns us that too much focus on the good life, if we are not careful, can quickly lead us away from God and reduce our earthly existence to something much less than what God has intended for human life. The story begins with this notion from Ecclesiastes that our wealth will one day be left for those who come after us. A man comes to Jesus worried about getting his inheritance that is properly due to him. According to the Judaic inheritance practices in Deuteronomy, an older brother would receive 2/3 of the estate, and the younger brother would receive 1/3. And so this brother, presumably the younger, less powerful brother, wants Jesus to help him possess his rightful possession. Jesus, however, has no interest in his problem and in being an arbiter of earthly wealth, and instead tells this parable of a greedy rich man. Now, the first thing to notice about this man in the parable is his insatiable desire for more wealth and how it has caused him to be blind to his current blessing. What is causing his anxiety? His very abundance. His land has produced so abundantly that he cannot see the blessing of what he already has. He asks, "What should I do? For I have no place to store my crops." But in fact, he does already have a place. He already has barns, and they are already full. But now his great abundance, rather than giving him more satisfaction and peace, has produced more need and thus more anxiety. Like the sage of Ecclesiastes, Jesus' parable reveals the folly of an unexamined life. This man needs to take a deep breath and relax enough with what he already has to reflect on his situation and on the situation of those around him and on the situation of those around him. Herein lies the key element of Jesus' wisdom. The good life for Jesus is a life that keeps us connected to those around us in a life-giving way. If this man could only break free from the relentless cycle of accumulation, he might discover that he has more than enough to be free from anxiety, that he already has all he needs to live the good life. If he could recognize his current abundance, he might be free to look beyond himself and see that he could use his resources to create a good life for others as well. Is that not what it means to be created in the image of God? We are created in the image of the good Creator, who gives life to a good creation, who makes it possible for creatures to live the good life. What could be more fulfilling for a human being created in the image of God than to know the joy of giving a good life to others? But the man in the parable can't see this. His abundance has not made him generous, but greedy. His vision is constricted. It's turned inward on himself. His speech is all about me, myself, and I. What should I do? I have no place to store my crops. I will do this. I will pull down my barns. I will store my grains and my goods. I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry. And for this constricted view of his reality, God calls this man a fool. In his barn building and his eating and drinking and merrymaking, he has forgotten the other half of the Old Testament saying that tomorrow we die. Or in his case, this very night. So, what is our takeaway here? Well, it seems there are all sorts of ways for us to be foolish. We can live an unexamined life, never pausing, never reflecting, never searching our souls for the meaning in all of our toil. Or we can be foolish by seeing only ourselves, putting ourselves at the center of all things, all our decision-making, by framing the meaning of life around our accumulation of things, shoring up our security for me, myself, and I, or even for me, myself, and my family. Or we can seek only the pleasure of life as our highest goal, forgetting that we are mortal and our lives will come to an end, and that there is a God, and that there are others around us put here by God, and that part of being human, as we learned today in Sunday school, is being part of a life-giving human community. And to fail to see our connection to others in the community is to throw off the image of God within us and replace it with a distorted image, a constricted image of ourselves. Yet there are plenty of ways to be foolish, but Jesus says there is a way to live a life that is truly life, a life that is rich toward God, which is truly to be rich. We've been hearing and seeing about this good life all year in the Gospel of Luke. Living the good life has to do with balancing our work with time spent just sitting and listening to Jesus, as with the story of Martha and Mary. Living the good life has to do with communing with God in prayer, as we heard from Pastor Trish's powerful sermon last week. Living the good life has to do with trusting that God will provide for our needs, like the birds of the air in the verses following this text. And living the good life has to do with giving up some of what we might otherwise keep for ourselves and sharing our resources with the community where we live, so the whole community and all of its members may thrive. Living the good life has to do with empathy toward others, compassion for those who struggle, and a willingness to say to our own souls, enough. I have enough, in order to say yes to someone else. There are many ways for us to share our abundance. Fourth Presbyterian gives us many great ways to know the joy of sharing, and together we enjoy great abundance. Thus, we have the capacity to meet great need here through Fourth Presbyterian Church. Together, we can live the good life by living into our purpose of being that community that loves God and one another and shares in God's life-giving work to be the people that God has created us to be. May it be so among us. Amen.